Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. You've reached Venus Unplugged, the virtual Heartbreak Hotel. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. And the Heartbreak Hotel is an exploration in all things that have to do with the inner world, because we need to begin to understand that the inner world informs the outer world, particularly in feelings and emotions and in the realm of relationships. So our heartbreak very often comes from not understanding the heart, not understanding what motivated or who motivated us, what archetype was up. An archetype is a inner psychic process. Okay. So for the last couple of weeks, we've been exploring the eternal feminine, which is the work of Toni Wolff. Toni Wolff was companion to Jung. She helped him enormously in developing his work, and she's little known of how much she has contributed to the Jungian work. And that's one of the reasons we're going to look at her, but also because she was this amazing, profound woman who just helped refine what the intuitive function is, and many, many other things. So there are a couple of books you can read about her. So the Eternal Feminine today is about the holy harlots. That's what I call them. I love that word, harlot. Mary Magdalene, Marilyn Monroe, and Toni Wolff. Okay. So I'm going to read a quote from Jung where he talks about the inner animus. The animus is the woman's male aspect. The male has a female internal aspect, and the woman has a male, kind of like a little bit like cat in the cradle, once you start understanding where we have contrasexual dynamics going on inside of us, which kind of really gives a little fire and heats up that pot, makes it really interesting, and then we can understand, whoa, what am I doing? I'm betraying myself because I don't know myself, and if I know myself, you have to understand that, the soul, the body is the soulmate of the soul. We come in with a soulmate. We come in with a body. It contains all this fabulousness, this wisdom. Sometimes it has wounding. Sometimes we have to walk with a wound in the body to remind us of whatever we need to be reminded of. So, at any rate, according to Jung, when the female, when she projects her inner masculine, the animus, on a living male, eventually she discovers he's less than perfect. If she does not learn how to love herself and her man in the midst of all the imperfections, or the woman, okay, not prejudice here, in the midst of all the imperfections they manifest as human beings, her unconscious inner animus becomes judgmental, bossy, and essentially disconnected. She becomes oblivious to those around her and isolated in her lofty opinions. Now, according to Toni Wolff's therapeutic model, is to bring this ideal into consciousness. So that's what her body of work was about. Toni Wolff explains these issues by stating that a woman may unconsciously or consciously project her inner animus onto a man whose faith in himself and what he can produce is in need of encouragement, and be of great help to him with her assistance. In the same manner, a man can project some ideal of perfection onto the woman and create for her a sort of feminine inspiration. While this can work for a while, ultimately it ends up in disappointment and what Wolff calls destructive consequences. Sometimes, to parlay it on a street level, sometimes it's a mercy fuck. You sleep with somebody who you really don't want to sleep. It's kind of like nice, but and then you walk away and think, what did I do that for? That wasn't really what I was thinking. And what happens is you intuitively pick up the Hatara. Now, the Hatara is not solely inspired by sex. That's really not her thing. That may be part of the dynamic, okay? But her way of relating, okay, is through being an equal, being a peer, inspiring, okay, which it can be cool, but it can also be destructive. So when you find yourself where you slept with somebody and you think, you walk away and think, what was that about? Who was that mass bandit? You see, you responded. You intuitively knew the healing balm that was needed through the sexual exchange. But when it's done unconscious, you walk away with nada. You walk away with nothing. And what happens is you constellate its opposite. And you feel used. But it's because you don't understand why, what motivated you, what was it about. Believe me, they didn't con you. I mean, in certain circumstances they can, but if we really know who we are and we know the Hatara in us, okay, now, as I said, we're going to be working at the mother archetype, the Hatara, and then next couple of weeks, the Amazon and the Medial woman. So we have all of these in us. One is more predominant than the other, but as we mature, hopefully, we make conscious, we become more aware of these aspects within ourselves. 4 is always the number of wholeness. So if you dream of 4, or 4 is important in your life, that represents the throne of Isis, wholeness. So when we are at least aware of these dynamics that are going on, these living principles that are really running our life, whether we're aware of it or not, we can then process in a completely different way. So let's say you find yourself sleeping with somebody, and you could do it again and again, and then you think, what the hell, what is, I thought we were going to read a book. You begin to realize you're responding to an archetype, and if it's not conscious, you feel used, and you will constellate the opposite. And the opposite of love is power. And then you become judgmental and rip people apart and do all that kind of stuff when you didn't realize what got evoked. So that's the power of consciousness, okay? Because with this, I've been thinking about this, the whole spiritual movement, which is extremely important, but I think in many ways it has helped us become disembodied from what's going on in the physical, what's going on in the realm of love, of exchange of the body. We don't want to be disembodied. We came to this planet from great distances to have a human experience. We all will leave and go back to spirit. So we need a balance. And that's why my work is involved in psyche, in the world, the living world, the dynamic world, the profound world of the unconscious. Okay, so we want to look at that. So just kind of reflect. That could be an interesting hard task. Let's look at people that you slept with and didn't quite understand what that was about, or that was not really your intention, but you found yourself doing it anyway, or you went like, oh, wow, what the hell? What the hell? On an esoteric level, if you sleep with somebody, if a woman sleeps with a man, his energy is in her auric field for 1 year. With a male, her auric field is within him for a month. Hey, I didn't make the rules. It's the way of the divine. So there's really no such thing as a one-night stand. It's one night and 364 days getting over it. So, which is cool. And sometimes it's worth it. Believe me, sometimes it's worth it. But the thing is to not feel used, to say, oh, my God, that was a teaching. The Hatara came up. She knew what was needed. I was not aware of her, right? I wanted, and what's the greatest power in the world but sexual? It's a teaching. It's an exchange. And if we know that and honor that and love that, not in a prissy way, but in a powerful, dynamic. Sex and beauty is fierce. It's not for the lighthearted. And it's one of the greatest human experiences. Because part of what is happening, this big shift that we're all feeling on some level, okay, is we're starting to realize, the archetypes, the gods, the god, whatever it is you want to see it, they need human love, and they need sexual exchange. They need that energy. We're kind of like diamonds for them, okay? And they use those energies. I don't know what for, because I'm not a goddess. I don't even claim to be in that community, because we can't be goddesses. We can be divinely human, okay? So the heavens, the gods, the archetypes, internally and externally, they need this energy called human exchange and love. And that's part of the dynamics of heartbreak, this great teaching. Because heartbreak is kind of the plot, but the outcome, hopefully, is wisdom. So now the shadow, the unconscious, the part that can get us into a little trouble of the Hatara, okay, sometimes she has difficulty making close associations with women, or women don't trust her. That's also true of the Venus. When you're kind of Venus possessed, your values are different. It's more about beauty and relatedness, and the mother archetype doesn't always trust that. Okay, the other goddesses don't always trust Venus. They'll use her, but they don't trust her. So that's the downside. Okay, and so other women find it difficult to trust or accept the Hatara woman. They don't understand it. Now, one of the, as I said, we're going to Marilyn Monroe, she was what was called an anima woman. So the anima woman is the one who unconsciously responds to the male's inner idea of the perfect woman, right? And she gets dreamed up. She knows how to respond to that. Now, she paid a great price by not making it conscious, okay? And when we don't make that conscious, it's the loss of selfhood. Let's say, as teenagers, the juvenile tease, okay, that's the shadow of the puella. And the puella is a term for the seductress. That's the female version of the puer, the flying boy, the one who can never commit, those. But the puella, we've got one of her too, and she doesn't care. She'll get you into strangers' arms in a matter of minutes, because her power is in the seduction. She doesn't give a shit about your soul. So we need to be aware of all this. Did you know you had this kingdom within? You do? Okay. So with the young girl, the teenager, right, or the highly charged animal woman, is the Hatara who loses her own personal creative life entirely, having allowed herself to be emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually devoured by her partner. Now, how that happens is we give it away. We don't see what the value is. And the man doesn't know what it is. Okay, and you're not going to say, oh, well, you got to value me. It's like you have to see the gold, the essence, the profundity of these forces. So the most tragedy is if the Hatara neglects her own personal growth, and in neglecting her and to separate her personal responsibility for her own talents from the power and influences of the partner, whether they be positive or negative in nature. This requires a strong intentionality, which many talented women have not been able to cultivate. The ego must be strong enough to support her talent. It is not uncommon for the immature Hatara to take on the identity of a partner, particularly if he's prominent. My husband, the great man, and she finishes it. And everybody kind of rolls their eyes and goes like, oh, please. We all know there's danger there. Or, my doctor said, or my accountant said, or the president said. They're always telling you what somebody else said. Well, what do you say? You need to be careful of that. Taking that, it's good to take in the great man or the great woman, but then we have to decipher. We have to make sure we're not giving everything up just to play only part of who we are. So the loss of projected identity can be extremely painful. Your ego strength is compromised. And it is highly possible for women to live in a free society with all the advantages of talent, opportunity, and choice and still remain psychologically bound, unconscious to the will of the male world. This sort of unconscious bondage need not be an inevitability with the Hatara. So that's what happens. We don't realize we're participating in a dangerous game because we don't know ourselves and don't have that kind of strength. Women have their own sovereignty. If you understand what that is and stand in that. Now, a lot of times we're afraid to stand in our principles, which is probably, sometimes it's because we don't know it, because we're not going to be liked. Hey, who cares whether you're liked? You're respected. You're honored. You're listened to. Light comes and goes. So Tony Wolff, was instrumental in introducing the intuition and sensation in Jung's work in the four archetypes. Months ago, I went over the four types: thinking, feeling, intuitive, and sensate. And that's little known that Tony Wolff was so instrumental in that. So there's a case of a woman who is the companion, sometimes lover, but most of all companion and inspiration for this great man. But she gets kind of whitewashed. All right. There is a book. It's called A Memoir of Tony Wolff by Irene Cher. I'm going to spell this one. Chamernowne. See, the Hatara stimulates and fertilizes the innermost life of the male partner, and he, in turn, brings forth her own creative life. Or so we hope. If a woman feels less than or more than the partner, well, actually, it's with the male, too. The partner fails to see the truth of one's own self. If we're inflated or deflated, I'm the most spiritual hot person on the planet. Oh, I'm lonely worm. Both of those are an extreme. They're an opposite of one another. So you're out of the ballpark with that one. Okay. So Marilyn Monroe, now she was an animal woman, and she's a familiar Hatara, and who intuits either consciously or unconsciously the male ideal in women and becomes her. She usually projects herself from knowing that this is exactly what she is doing. So we really don't want to know what we're up to. But it's very cool when we do. But if she does understand it, then she knows how to enjoy the fun and her flirtations and when to back off and become real. That didn't always happen with Marilyn. They could dream her up, but when she got bounced back into herself, she wasn't informed enough of her inner reality to realize that she had the power to be dreamed up and then dump it. But there was so much more in her, okay? Many years ago, I went out on this date. I'm giving this not to talk about myself, but just as an example, and I was having a lovely time. I didn't really think anything was really, some great exchange was going on. As a matter of fact, I was bored, which is always death for a Gemini. And at any rate, this guy's yakking up and everything, and he liked me. And suddenly, I start to feel like I'm a balloon. And he's like blowing air into me. And I'm thinking, what is this weird sensation? And then I realized he was making assumptions. Right? He was saying, oh, well, if nothing else happens, we're going to be friends. And I'm thinking, What are you talking about? You're a stranger. It's been a long time before we're going to be friends. I don't know who you are. You know, friends and lovers takes a long time. And so he's oblivious to that. He doesn't know that because he wants to blow his anima. He wants me to become his ideal woman. Well, that wasn't going to be happening. So I replied to him, you know, that it's very interesting of what he'd like to achieve here and his assumptions, but time's going to determine that. Because for me, friendship, it's a cultivated art and something to be earned. And he didn't like that because I didn't accept his projection. So that balloon just went and blew up, and I watched his fantasy just collapse. But if I hadn't caught it, I would have come home with this weird feeling like I was wearing a cheap suit, you know, because you are who you are, and when you're real, it's like the Velveteen Rabbit, that's who you are. And when people are trying to project things into you or onto you, it's a violation of your authenticity. You can't do that. You can be loving and kind when you explain it, but you can't accept that. That's not who you are. And a lot of heartbreak comes out of that when we try to please. Later for that. To please, you know, I tell people it's very easy. I'm more cat than dog. Cats don't betray themselves. They live according to the divine's nature, okay? So when the Hatara loses her own personal creative life entirely, having allowed herself to be emotionally, spiritually, intellectually devoured by her partner, by loss of her sense of self, she had unconsciously awarded the man the position of God in her psyche, and thereby granted him full permission to destroy her own ability to create. And you notice in the beginning of all love affairs that he's absolute, he's God, he's the divine. Wait 6 months when the projection falls down, and that's not a negative. It's just you need to be in that state because you do see the divine in one another. And then after about 6 months, you've gotten enough of that, and you start becoming back into who you are, and that's when the real relation begins. So it's very tragic when the Hatara neglects to separate her personal responsibility for her own talents from the powerful influences of her partner, be they positive or negative. So this requires a strong ego intentionality, which I said before, and I'm going to say it again. Women need to cultivate that. And your ego needs to be strong enough to support your talent. The Hatara needs to be admired by men, whether professionally or personally, which that's cool. That's where her identity, you know, the mother needs to be admired by her children. And here's a quote from Tony Wolff. Tony Wolff's partner said they must be peers, which means they share the degree of interest, intellect, talent, and energy for life. As I said, Tony Wolff contributed to the 4 types. And another quote is, the function of the Hatara is to awaken the individual psychic life of the male and to lead him through and beyond his male responsibilities towards the formation of total personality. So we can help refine. You know, that's part of our talent, that's part of our beauty, and that's part of loving. But when it becomes power, where we're going to tell the man who he should be, well, that's not going to rock. And if he accepts that, then he becomes mother-bound, and there goes sex. Okay, you need to look at that. These are all natural aspects of who we are as women. Now, of course, my most beloved, Mary Magdalene, now there's a woman, okay, who was both Hatara. Well, actually, if we look at it close, types, okay? So Mary Magdalene, I don't know if you know that, but she was the woman who funded, okay? So Mary Magdalene, she has become for women the archetypal container of all the great opposites. She was the companion of Christ. She witnessed his crucifixion. She was the first to see the risen Christ. She financially funded his cause. And in the Gnostic teachings, the gospel according to Mary, Christ tells the Magdalene that there's no such thing as sin. Well, that'll rock your world. So there we have this incredible example of this woman who was considered the prostitute. She was the companion. Some of the apostles were furious that there was indication that she was the closest apostle to Magdalene. Some say that she was at the Last Supper. All of these things are very interesting because we, the royal we, the we of the 21st century, we're rewriting the myths. We're refining them. We're seeing things that we never saw before. And that's part of what Venus Unplugged is about, too, is let's make this all conscious. So the Magdalene is a woman who she also inspired Christ's teaching. Oh, I know that's going to get people a little upset, but she did. He knew that, and he stuck up for her. He would just say, "No, she's my Mary. She's my lady," she was given a lot of the. It's in the Gnostic teaching. She was given a lot of the teachings that the other apostles were not given because she could understand it at another level, not because she was favored. Not because he was sleeping with her or not sleeping with her or having his children or not having it. It was because she understood. She was his anima. Mary Magdalene was Christ's anima. Now, go feel that one through. So that's part of what this is about, all right? When we start to understand, and when we make these conscious, these different parts, we can call on them. Because they're all part of the collective unconscious. It's not as that like, whoa, this one's this. No. But we need to know what we're doing. If we're just doing it, it's just happening to you, that's unconscious. And then you wake up like, how did that happen? If I hadn't caught that energy of that stranger who wanted to dream me up as his anima, I would have been confused for days. Like, something was wrong. What got into me? Something's wrong. I'm feeling out of sorts. Because it's a theft. I mean, if it's something projected into you that you like, well, you'll take it. But if it's not you, and then in the middle of a relationship, somebody says, oh, you've changed. No, you didn't change. You just became conscious. And that's the really cool part about heartbreak is the teacher. It's the one that breaks our heart open and into wisdom. If we will continue to tell ourselves the story, if at the moment of heartbreak, disappointment, death, whatever it might be, we think that's the end, and we just go like, okay, I'll just replace this, bam, and we replace it. We replace it at the same level. It's kind of like in alcoholism. They say that, you stop growing at the age you took your first drink. That's pretty terrifying. Well, sometimes we stop at the age of our first love. So the Queen's telling me I got to bounce. What's that thing I'm supposed to do? Oh, I'm supposed to tell everybody to go on Venus Unplugged, Facebook, sign up. If you wish to have a personal reading, I'm also doing it on Skype and phone these days, 212-757-8914. And your heart task is to go back and observe your first love and everything you believed and everything you thought and what got disappointed and what didn't. Really just observe it and just see, have you grown or are you still expecting that? If you are, you better listen to every one of these episodes because my listeners, we are going to grow. We're going to grow in Venus because that's what the new edge is. The new edge is when we begin to understand the archetypes, need the human experience, and if we're just doing the same thing again and again, they can't use that. Human love is awesome, and that's what this planet is about. So tune in next week. Oh, did I give you my 212-757-8914. I always forget to sensate practical. Obviously, that's my inferior function. The truth is out. So, my beloveds, hasta la vista. Bye.
They're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide, now playing.